Welcome back to Pivot Point. I am your host, Maya Rockeymoore, and it is my pleasure to talk about an issue that is near and dear to my heart, Alzheimer's and related dementias. And here to talk about that today is Susan Kudla-Finn, CEO of the National Capital Region of the Alzheimer Foundation. Welcome, Susan.
Good morning.
Is it Kudla or Kudla?
It's Kudla.
Okay.
And president of the National Capital Area of the Alzheimer's Association.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Thank you for the correction. So you have a lot of personal experience as well as professional experience with the issue of Alzheimer's. Can you tell us what this disease is and what it does?
The disease itself, Alzheimer's disease, is a debilitating long goodbye. It affects people in different ways, and there is no cure. It is the sixth leading cause of death. No cure, no way to stop, and no way to prevent the disease. And it's a national health crisis.
And is there an actual, what is happening to the brain scientifically, I guess you will, or medically, that it can no longer function in a way that it once did?
Brain cells are dying with this disease. And as a result, the brain continues to shrink, and people are not able to conduct their lives and their activities of daily living in a way they once did.
Mm-hmm. So
that's why they need help.
So it actually is a physical phenomena that the brain cells are actually shrinking and dying, and it causes the functions, the normal functions they once had to disappear, where over time and they can't care for themselves anymore. They can't remember those that they knew and loved. Tell us about your own personal experience with your father.
My dad was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment 15 years prior to his death. He was a gregarious figure in the community, loved by all, and he began to, as we would say, and as most people say, get forgetful. And we were not sure why this was occurring. The myth that we are facing in our country and throughout the world is that Alzheimer's is a normal part of aging, and I want to say there is nothing normal about this disease. It is a brain disease. So initially we were confused by his forgetfulness, and then he was diagnosed. So what I encourage our listeners to do is, if there is any concern about memory loss that disrupts your loved one's daily life, that you go to your physician, your primary care physician, to look at how and discuss with the physician what the signs are, what you're observing, and then take steps to address them. Mm-hmm. So if you memory loss that disrupts daily life, if challenges in planning and solving problems, confusion around where they are, and trouble understanding visual images, there are 10 warning signs. So I would encourage to go to alz.org and learn about the 10 warning signs to help them get the help they need.
And did your father eventually lose all capacity to recognize those around him?
He did.
Yeah.
He did.
So I actually come to this from my own experience as well. My brother-in-law recently passed away. It turns out his was some form of dementia. But to see, and it was quick. It happened over the course of really 3 years. And I saw the progression. I mean, it was astounding how fast he declined. And by the end of his life, he was unable to swallow. He'd forgotten how to swallow. He was unable to recognize anyone around him. If he did speak, it was mostly gibberish. And he just had an inability to care for himself, to perceive the world around him. And it was really, really devastating for his caretaker, his spouse. And so with that, I think that there are many dimensions to this disease, not just affecting the people who it's affecting directly, but also the caretakers.
It most certainly is, and while our focus is initially with a diagnosis to get help for the individual, our loved one who has this disease, what's also important is that we focus on the caregiver and provide the support and help to caregivers. We have can call, and we encourage. It's 800-272-3900. So if they have any concerns about what they're observing, first of all, of course, go to your doctor, but also call us at 800-272-3900 for any additional help that we can provide.
Okay, fantastic. So I am going to take a break, and I'd love for you to stay with us so that we can talk about the policy angle of this after the break. Can you do that?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. You are listening to Pivot Point with Maya Rockeymoore, sponsored by the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.
Americans of all ages and political parties agree they do not support cutting Social Security and Medicare benefits to pay for Washington's fiscal failures. Putting millions of middle-class and poor Americans and their families at risk in the name of deficit reduction is not fiscal responsibility. Social Security and Medicare strengthen our economy and our families. Call the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare at 1-800-966-1935 or visit us at thenationalcommittee.org. You can make a difference.
Welcome back to Pivot Point. I am your host, Maya Rockeymoore, and we are joined by Susan Kudla-Fenn. She is the president and CEO of the Alzheimer's Association of the National Capital Area Chapter. Is that correct, Susan?
Correct.
All right. And so with this, we know that we have a challenging disease, that it affects many people across the country. Do you actually have a number about, for how many people it affects?
Yes, there are over 5 million people in our country that have been diagnosed with the disease, and over 330,000 people in the Washington metropolitan area.
And so many people, and then the question becomes, what are we doing from a policy perspective, and how are we investing in learning more about this disease since so many people are affected all across the country? And so, what is happening? Is NIH doing anything on this?
Yes, NIH, Dr. Francis Collins has been a real leader in helping direct funds for research. The Alzheimer's Association is the largest funder of largest nonprofit funder of Alzheimer's research in this country, and we have taken a leadership role in working with the United States Congress as well as with NIH in helping to advance the need for additional funding. Before the Senate right now is legislation as part of the President's budget allocating $104 million for Alzheimer's research, and we desperately need that funding in order to continue to have a focus on finding a cure.
And so is your organization comprised of volunteers who actually go to the Hill to advocate for legislation on this?
Yes, we have a nationwide network of advocates, volunteers who annually go to Capitol Hill in April for our Advocacy Day and discuss in very specific terms the human and financial toll that families experience in having to face this dreadful disease.
And why is research so important? And are there other aspects that you fund or you seek to achieve through policy change? In addition to research, is there something else on your agenda?
Yes. In addition to underscoring and making clear the importance of allocating $104 million in the fiscal year 2014 funding bill, we also know how important it is for families and caregivers to get the help and support they need. So before Congress right now, there is the HOPE Act. And what the HOPE Act would do is help to increase the diagnosis of this disease, provide information on medical and non-medical services for newly diagnosed patients, and document the diagnosis in the patient's medical record. So many times, medical doctors are so busy in looking at and examining a patient that there is not enough time, simply not enough time, to talk with families about the potential devastation of this disease. So the HOPE Act would give that opportunity and help increase the diagnosis to get help.
And as far as you know, are there any studies that show a causal linkage for why this occurs? Do we have any causality for why people may get Alzheimer's?
Age is the leading risk factor for getting the disease. Also, family history is also a risk factor. Because Alzheimer's has there are two proteins. They're called plaques and tangles in plain English, and researchers are really looking at and exploring the challenges associated with other comorbidities like diabetes, like Parkinson's. My father had a stroke. My father had Parkinson's disease, and my father was a Golden Gloves boxer with head trauma. So there are comorbidities associated with Alzheimer's disease that make it more complicated to diagnose. And researchers are working night and day to untangle these mysteries. But protein tau and beta amyloid are the two proteins that researchers are focusing on and looking to determine causalities and linkages. So we are moving forward on research. We are getting closer to finding a cure, but we're not there yet.
And in terms of treatment, are there any advances in treatment? It just seems like the most that doctors can do now is just try to ease them as painlessly as possible to their death.
Sadly, there is no treatment and there is no cure. There are medications that provide temporary help, but there sadly is no strategy and no medications to stop, slow down, or prevent this disease.
Okay. So tell us just more about your organization. Where can we learn more about your organization? Mm-hmm.
You can learn more about our organization by going to alz.org. And those in this area, if they do a /NCA, standing for National Capital Area, they can come right to our website. There's nothing like actively participating in an organization to learn and experience who we are and what we do. And our walks are coming up. We have a walk to end Alzheimer's on the National Mall on October 26th. I would welcome you to join, as well as your listeners, to join us, to join arms and voices for those who can speak for themselves, to bring attention and focus to this devastating disease. So October 19th, we are in Manassas at the Harris Pavilion, and October 26th, we are on the National Mall.
Okay, October 19th in Virginia at you said Harris Pavilion?
Correct.
And October 26th at the National Mall.
And Mr. Rashern Baker, who
Yes.
is
Yes.
will be one of our keynote speakers there. As we all know, he's county executive in Prince George's County, and his wife sadly was diagnosed several years ago with younger onset Alzheimer's, and he will be there leading his walk team and inspiring all of us, offering hope and help.
Thank you for your leadership, Susan, and I encourage all of the listening audience to check out their website. If you can volunteer, please do volunteer. If you can show up for the walks, please do. Thank you again.
Thank you.
You are listening to Pivot Point with Maya Rockeymoore, sponsored by the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare.
When I started working decades ago, I didn't know anything about Social Security or Medicare. I was too busy earning a living, buying a house, and raising a family. But life has a way of surprising us. A death in my family and disability first introduced me to Social Security. I'm counting on it when I retire. And thanks to Medicare, I know I'll have the health care I need in retirement. Social Security and Medicare are vital to millions of American families. They also contribute hundreds of billions of dollars to our economy each year. So why are some in Washington threatening benefit cuts to reduce the deficit? It makes no sense. Benefit cuts for the middle class and tax breaks for the wealthy is not fiscal responsibility. It's bad for our economy and even worse for our families. That's why I joined the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. Together, we're working to ensure Washington strengthens the programs we paid into throughout our working lives. Call 1-800-966-1935 or visit online at thenationalcommittee.org. We can make a difference.
Americans of all ages and political parties agree they do not support cutting Social Security and Medicare benefits to pay for Washington's fiscal failures. Putting millions of middle class and poor Americans and their families at risk in the name of deficit reduction is not fiscal responsibility. Social Security and Medicare strengthen our economy and our families. Call the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare at 1-800-966-1935 or visit us at thenationalcommittee.org. You can make a difference.
Social Security protects us against loss of income due to retirement, disability, or death. We pay into Social Security throughout our working lives, which is why we must stop Congress or the White House from cutting our earned benefits. Join our powerful national movement to protect Social Security for current and future generations. Call the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare at 1-800-966-1935 or visit us online at thenationalcommittee.org. You can make a difference.
When I started working decades ago, I didn't know anything about Social Security or Medicare. I was too busy earning a living, buying a house, and raising a family. But life has a way of surprising us. A death in my family and disability first introduced me to Social Security. I'm counting on it when I retire. And thanks to Medicare, I know I'll have the health care I need in retirement. Social Security and Medicare are vital to millions of American families. They also contribute hundreds of billions of dollars to our economy each year. So why are some in Washington threatening benefit cuts to reduce the deficit? It makes no sense. Benefit cuts for the middle class and tax breaks for the wealthy is not fiscal responsibility. It's bad for our economy and even worse for our families. That's why I joined the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. Together, we're working to ensure Washington strengthens the programs we paid into throughout our working lives. Call 1-800-966-1935 or visit online at thenationalcommittee.org. We can make a difference.
Social Security protects us against loss of income due to retirement, disability, or death. We pay into Social Security throughout our working lives, which is why we must stop Congress or the White House from cutting our earned benefits. Join our powerful national movement to protect Social Security for current and future generations. Call the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare at 1-800-966-1935 or visit us online at thenationalcommittee.org. You can make a difference.
Americans of all ages and political parties agree they do not support cutting Social Security and Medicare benefits to pay for Washington's fiscal failures. Putting millions of middle class and poor Americans and their families at risk in the name of deficit reduction is not fiscal responsibility. Social Security and Medicare strengthen our economy and our families. Call the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare at 1-800-966-1935 or visit us at thenationalcommittee.org. You can make a difference.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.
Welcome back to Pivot Point. I am your host, Maya Rockeymoore. The United States of America is now shut down. It is closed for business. Now, what does this mean, and why are we here? We know that the Republicans have said that they are basically refusing to extend the continuing resolution because they're opposed to Obamacare. They're opposed to American citizens, including many of their constituents, many of whom have pre-existing conditions. They're opposed to them actually getting access to affordable care. And then you hear Republicans on television saying, like Ted Cruz, saying that, I'm not so worried about people getting access to care. I'm worried about people getting jobs because they're unemployed. But Ted Cruz doesn't know, he must not know, that 2/3 of people who are uninsured in America have full-time jobs. 2/3 of Americans who do not have health insurance have full-time jobs. Another 16% are part-time workers. We're not talking about people on the dole. We're talking about people who are getting up every day and going to work, who cannot get insurance because either their employer doesn't offer it to them, or because it's unaffordable to them, or because they have a pre-existing condition and they have been locked out of the system, meaning that the insurance companies have historically prevented people from getting access to care if they have a health condition that would potentially be costly to the insurance agency. And so the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act actually addresses this. It prevents insurance companies from discriminating based on pre-existing condition. It prevents the insurance companies from discriminating based on whether you're a woman, because women of childbearing age are often charged more. It does so many things. It offers affordable access to care, and yet the Republicans are against this. They are against this. And so here we are with the government on shutdown. The question is what does that actually mean for the nation? Many people know that, the planes are still flying. The air traffic controllers are still on the job. And so the fact of the matter is that even though the United States of America is on shutdown, essential services will continue. However, there are a number of other things, other areas, other people who will not. Government workers are being furloughed. Those who are considered non-essential are certainly being furloughed. There are some who are continuing to work who will not get paid. Some who are continuing to work who will not get paid. And it's possible that if Congress doesn't come back after this is all over, and hopefully it will all be over sooner rather than later, Congress will come back and offer to pay them, but that's not a foregone reality. And so with that, there are a number of effects. Programs like Head Start. And we talked about Head Start a lot because Head Start has been hit by cuts to the government. It's been hit by the sequester. And yet the government shutdown also will harm those programs as well, with some actually shutting their doors until they can get the resources they need to reopen. And so there are effects that many people are not talking about. The FDA, some of their inspections will be suspended. The Park Service, we know that many parks have been closed down. And so there are many government services that will be affected directly by the government shutdown. And we need to understand that there are definitely consequences to this. But the politics of this are absolutely concerning because how is it that a faction in one part of the government, and the faction I'm calling the Republican Party, I actually think that we let the Republicans off too lightly when we say that it's all because of the Tea Party faction of the Republican Party. But Republicans don't have to go with the Tea Party faction, and yet almost the entire caucus has voted with this faction, and they have caused the nation to go on lockdown. And this is of concern ultimately for our democracy, because if minorities within a minority actually can gain control of government to the point of shutting it down and to the point of possibly forcing the nation to default on its debt, then we actually have a flaw in the design of our democracy. We have a flaw in the design of our democracy. And this is of concern because this is about certainly maintaining something that has been here for hundreds of years now and strengthening it, not undermining it. And yet the Republican Party in the House of Representatives has proven time and time again that not only will they stand in the way of Americans getting access to health care, which, by the way, they have to pay for, which, by the way, is all a part of a capitalist system. There's nothing socialist about Obamacare. They're opposed to it, and their intransigence, their brattiness, if you will, their willingness to be crybabies because democracy didn't work for them, is allowing them to shut down the nation, is simply inexplicable and simply unforgivable. It'll be interesting to see in 2014 whether or not this carries over. It'll be interesting to see if the people who elect these Republicans actually come out and vote against them, vote new people into office. I tell you what, if I were a Republican in any of the districts of the people who are actually causing this shutdown to happen, I would stand up and run a primary challenge. I would run a primary challenge against those Tea Party Republicans who seem not to care about their constituents or the nation. I would run a primary challenge, and guess what? I would win. I would win because they don't have a leg to stand on. When you're for killing babies, when you're for killing people who have health challenges because they can't get access to care, then you're not for your constituents. When you're for shutting down the government and you're for forcing people and the nation to default on its debt, then you are not American. I call that treason. It's treasonous. And so with that, we need to be concerned because this is an attack on our nation. It's an attack on our national security, if you will. And we have to do something about it. Now, surprisingly, the Democrats are standing firm. And that is a great thing because there is no value, there is no glory in siding with the Republicans on this. Democrats actually have the facts and the values and the issues on their side. I hope they continue to stand firm. I hope President Obama doesn't use the debt ceiling negotiation as an excuse to go for that grand bargain that he's been talking about for the past 5 years. There is no glory, there is no honor in negotiating with people who would take your signature achievement, President Obama, and drive it into a ditch. There is no glory, there is no honor in negotiating over the debt ceiling with people who would cut benefits for seniors as a part of a chain CPI, who would cut benefits for federal workers, who would cut benefits for veterans. There is no glory, there is no honor in negotiating a grand bargain. And it is my greatest hope that the grand bargain is dead. You are listening to Pivot Point with Maya Rockeymoore, sponsored by the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare.
Americans of all ages and political parties agree they do not support cutting Social Security and Medicare benefits to pay for Washington's fiscal failures. Putting millions of middle class and poor Americans and their families at risk in the name of deficit reduction is not fiscal responsibility. Social Security and Medicare strengthen our economy and our families. Call the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare at 1-800-966-1935 or visit us at thenationalcommittee.org. You can make a difference.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.
Hello, America, and welcome to Pivot Point, a show bringing you diverse views on the news. I'm your host, Maya Rockeymoore. Well, I'm pleased to be joined by Max Richmond. He is the president and CEO of the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. Welcome, Max.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Max, it was a year ago, almost to the day, that the National Committee devoted itself to supporting a new venture, a radio show focused on senior issues. There's nothing out there like it, and you decided to put your resources behind it. And since that time, we have focused on everything from Alzheimer's to threats to Social Security and Medicare, to certainly the politics of the debt ceiling, the Bush tax cuts. There have been a plethora of issues facing seniors that have been on the national agenda. And I just want to say thank you for this year's support. It has been a phenomenal year, and certainly we have enjoyed talking to you and your brilliant staff during this time.
Well, thank you so much for those kind words. It's been an honor for me and for the National Committee to participate in Pivot Point. The staff and I myself have had the opportunity a number of times to discuss issues, and you've done an invaluable service by putting together such an important program, and I wish you great success as you go on.
Thank you so much. Max, you know, the government is shut down. And
yes,
incredibly, it's shut down by a party who says that they're fundamentally opposed to people getting access to affordable care. How do you explain this, Max?
It's inexplicable. It's a situation where I think ideology has triumphed over what we should be doing the right thing, if you will. Holding the government hostage is the wrong approach. You know, the Affordable Care Act has been law for 3 years. I think the Congress and the House has voted, I think, 41 or 42 times, to repeal the law. They've gone to the Supreme Court and argued that it is unconstitutional. They lost. So now there those forces, and it is a minority, I think, of the Republican Party, has been able to leverage their power to shut down the government.
But
I'm sorry. What I wanted to say is we're going to see Act 2 of this, I think, play out in a couple of weeks when we reach an even more critical situation when the government needs to act to raise the debt limit.
I'm gonna get to that in a second. But I actually think that we let the Republicans in the House off the hook when we say that it's just the Tea Party Republicans and their caucus is causing this, because they've been voting for this stuff. They've voted for it as a caucus and as a bloc time and time again, and they voted for refusing to present a clean CR. And so I'm not going to let the Republican Party in the House off the hook by saying that it's just the Tea Party faction. Max, the Social Security Administration has indicated that they're going to have to furlough staff as a result of the shutdown. What will this mean for people who are relying on Social Security benefits across the country?
Well, Social Security checks will be sent out. People that are entitled to their Social Security benefits will receive them. However, you're correct. There will be a very difficult time if you need to discuss a problem with the Social Security Administration, file papers, call staff, because that will be very difficult, if not impossible, if this continues, the shutdown continues beyond a couple of days. But as I mentioned before, and you said you were going to get into it, if the debt limit is not raised, then we are going to see problems with actual checks, benefit checks being delayed. And who knows how long that's going to take. And that simply is just not acceptable.
So people are not aware of this, that I think they're confused between the difference between the debt ceiling and shutting the government down. And so you have brought up a very important point. The Treasury Secretary has said that around October 17th, the government will no longer have enough funds to continue without raising the debt limit. And Republicans have presented a Christmas tree list of options that they are potentially going to put up for demand in addition to this government shutdown in order to allow an increase in the debt limit. Now, the president has said that he will not negotiate. And my question for you is, what do you foresee will happen?
Well, I think the president is correct in the position he's taken as far as refusing to negotiate. Our concern is, yes, the government has shut down, and that is raising some real problems for Social Security beneficiaries, not in receiving their checks, their benefit checks, which they are earned. But the next move, I think, is going to be so critical, because what we worry about at the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare, that when and if Republicans, and I agree with you, I'm not letting anybody off the hook, when Republicans realize that they have failed in delaying or defunding Obamacare, our concern is the next move will be demands as far as any ultimatums to increase the debt limit, demands to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And unfortunately, I think the Republicans in the House are quite likely to simply propose the president's own budget, which would make reductions in Medicare benefits and would reduce the Social Security cost of living adjustment by virtue of the proposal that I'm sure many of your informed listeners are aware of, the chain CPI. It's bad policy. It would lower the cost of living adjustment. It would hurt our economy. It would hurt output in our economy, including, of course, reductions in benefits, which become more and more dramatic over time, and therefore will affect unemployment. So that's the next shoe that's going to drop, and that's what we're focused on in the coming days.
So there are two parts to this, Max. One is that if Republicans, and I believe that they will be unsuccessful in getting the American people to buy into this notion that the nation has to be saved from Obamacare, and that's why we're shutting down government. I think people are and will continue to become increasingly angry at the Republicans for what they are doing to the nation and what they are preventing people from getting access to, basic health care. And so will we have an appetite as a nation to engage them and entertain them yet again in their fit of pique by creating this high-stake negotiation atmosphere around the debt ceiling? Do you think that will be, I think perhaps they will see the wisdom or the rationality of their ways and refrain from doing so. I'm going to let you answer that first, and then I have a follow-up question.
Well, I hope you're right. I hope they become more rational and go beyond their fits of pique. But we haven't seen much to be optimistic about in this game of ping pong in the last few days. And as I say, in this political game, when I call it a game, in some ways it is. I feel that they're going to look towards Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid almost as face-saving devices. If they end up giving in on, and for the time being anyway, allowing the government to reopen and without undercutting the Affordable Care Act. So I hope that they will see the light. But the only way, as you pointed out, they'll see the light is if they feel the heat. And that comes from the American people, from groups such as the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. And as you know, we have been conducting town hall meetings around the country. We released, I think, a very important study that was produced by Dean Baker, renowned economic policy maker, who's, as you know, the co-director of the Center for Economic and Policy Research, just released it today at a press event, which shows how important the Social Security program and the COLA is to seniors, to the economy across the country.
What was the bottom line of the study?
The bottom line is that we are going to lose throughout the country over time 130, 140 billion dollars in. What some people I think are not aware of is that the economic output that using as Dean Baker using office projections will exceed even that. Because those folks that are receiving less in Social Security will not have that money to support local economies. So what's really unique about the study is we divided it up by congressional district. We're pushing this out today after our press event this morning across the country so that members of Congress in every single congressional district will know what a reduction in Social Security by using this new formula for computing the COLA, the cost of living adjustment, will mean in terms of not only benefits to their constituents who are on Social Security, but also to jobs in their districts and to economic output. And it's pretty dramatic. We had on the phone an assemblywoman from New Jersey and a business owner from that same congressional district who discussed the impact, not just, as I said, in benefits that will be lost, dollars that will be lost to beneficiaries, but in the effect on local economies. So I'm hoping that what we're trying to do is raise this issue in a very profound way so that if the Social Security program and the COLA change specifically is relied on as a negotiating tool, we can undermine it and stop it in its tracks.
Now, Max, the president has already said that he refuses to negotiate around the debt ceiling. So would this put him, even though he proposed these bad measures in his budget, does that basically announcement he made put him in a lockbox to prevent him from negotiating around Social Security, Medicare, and the other issues that they have on their Christmas tree wish list?
Well, whether he negotiates or not, and he has made it pretty clear that he does not intend to, it provides ammunition to those who would use Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid reductions as a bargaining chip. So whether he sticks to his guns and does not engage in negotiations of this, the budget that he has put out, I think makes our job more difficult, because what I see happening, and I've seen it at these town hall meetings with Democrats who are asked about the president's budget, specifically the change in the cost of living adjustment, and they have said, many of them that I have been with, some of them have been pressed into this position, They have stated, we support many things that the president has proposed. We're against changing the formula for determining the cost of living adjustment because it will hurt seniors, it will lower benefits. So I do worry, as you point out, that the president's own budget, his own words, will be used against the administration and against Democrats who have come out in opposition to it. That's why it's incumbent upon us as a national organization representing seniors and as our name states, the Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. We need to do everything we can to let members of Congress understand how strongly seniors feel about this. This is a hot-button issue. There's
Right.
no question about it.
Max, it seems to me that there is a strategic opportunity for the Democratic Party here at this junction and point in time. If the Republicans indeed do present the president's own budget as their list of demands for raising the debt ceiling, is this not an opportunity for the Democrats to actually disavow the president's budget heading into the 2014 elections?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, and say that they are actually not for undermining the economic security and the health security of seniors across the country.
I not only think it's an opportunity, I think it's one that they cannot squander. They need to be very vocal about it. As I just mentioned, I have been in the last month or so. I have been in Des Moines, Iowa, with Senator Harkin. I've been with Senator Shaheen in New Hampshire. I've been with Congresswoman Kathy Castor in Florida, with Congressman Ron Barber in the Tucson area, with Congressman Ann Kirkpatrick in northern Arizona. They have been very clear. They listened to the seniors at the town hall meeting. They came out clearly stating we are opposed to cutting Social Security. We are opposed to changing the cost of living adjustment formula. And we need to replicate that. And that's what we intend to do over the next couple of weeks here in Washington and around the country. We have had field events in the last few days in Colorado. We think that it's not only, as you pointed out, it's an opportunity for Democrats to show that they're committed to protecting Social Security and their beneficiaries and the economy that would suffer by this change. So I'm encouraging them, and many that I've been with in the last few days, including Congressman Peter Deutsch, who's on the press call we had this morning, have been very clear. We need to make sure more and more of them are vocal, and we intend to do that.
So, Max, what's on the intermediate horizon for the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare? What, beyond the debt ceiling, are your priorities?
Well, we have, as you may know, we have a related 501c3, a foundation. We have put together some very important events, starting out on the West Coast later this month, where Congressman Mike Thompson is going to participate, and we are trying to get information out around the country, and we're going to replicate this in other communities through our foundation, National Committee Foundation, to distribute information so that some of the people that have been affected by the Supreme Court decision on that impacts Social Security benefits as well as many other benefits through as a result of the Windsor decision, and
which is about same-sex marriage.
About same-sex marriage, exactly. And the benefits that accrue to partners in same-sex marriages. So we are trying to get information out through our foundation. We've been pretty successful so far. We had a terrific, well-attended, well-publicized event earlier this summer, and we're going to follow that up in communities across the country. I think it's only fair that those who pay into this program find that the benefits are available, and I'm talking about survivor benefits, spousal benefits, children's benefits, that we are all treated equal, resulting from the Supreme Court case.
And so it is your mission to make sure that all eligible same-sex couples are aware of their opportunity to apply for Social Security benefits as a spouse, to have the same benefits as heterosexual couples, and that is your focus over the next several.
That's the focus.
Okay.
That is the focus of our foundation.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Very good. Well, Max, I just want to thank you again. You all have been a fabulous sponsor. I think that we've done a service for the nation. A lot of the clips from the show have gone out through the internet. And, of course, we're syndicated in Iowa, of all places, as well. But with that, the need for information about aging issues, the need for a strong advocate to stand to fight against threats to Social Security and Medicare has never been greater. And I think that the National Committee under your leadership has risen to the challenge and time and again has fought off the threats. And so I want to congratulate you on your leadership and thank you again for your support of Pivot Point with Maya Rockeymoore.
Well, it's my pleasure to be associated with you and your program. I look forward to continuing a relationship with you over the years. You've been a fabulous host. You created Pivot Point, and you have made sure it's a success. So you have done a great service to seniors and to all Americans by getting straight information out to the public, dispelling all of the myths that we hear constantly about these programs. And as you have said to me many times, these are not entitlements. These are earned benefits that people paid for while they're working, and they need to be able to receive them without being put in a position where their benefits are bargaining chips in debates in the Congress and throughout the administration. So I thank you for everything you've done,
Max,
for seniors.
Thank you. If people want to learn more or contribute to either the National Committee or the National Committee's Foundation, what websites do you have for them?
I'm so glad you asked that. It's ncpssm.org. And for those that would like to contact us by phone, we have a toll-free number. It's 1-800-966-1935. 1-800-966-1935. Easy to remember. It's the year Social Security became law.
All right. Thank you so much, Max. Thank you, and continued best wishes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
You are listening to Pivot Point with Maya Rockeymoore, sponsored by the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. Thanks again to our listening audience for joining us for yet another edition of Pivot Point with Maya Rockeymoore, sponsored by the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. We thank our sponsor for their year-long support. We look forward to moving into a next year focused on a variety of issues that move beyond aging but still embrace aging. We air every Thursday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time and every Sunday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Please do listen to us again, of course, if you are in the Washington, D.C. area on 1480 a.m. Until next time, America.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.